For an addict, the object of their addiction can be both their greatest pleasure and their greatest agony. They fall into a cycle of addiction and get trapped in it. But the good news is there's also a cycle of recovery, a way out. If you think you might be struggling with an addiction, or just want to understand addiction better, this video will explain how someone can get stuck and provide insights into how to get free. If there is someone you know who could benefit from this, you may want to share it with them as well. My name is Isaac, and I was addicted to porn for 16 years before I finally made my way to a recovery meeting. Now, 8 years later, I am one of the leaders of that group, and I have spent most of those 8 years totally sober. And I know that people can struggle with the word addiction. The best definition I have seen is from Psychology Today, where they say, addiction is a condition that results when a person ingests a substance, for example, alcohol, cocaine, or nicotine, or engages in an activity, such as gambling, sex, or shopping, that can be pleasurable, but the continuation of which becomes compulsive and interferes with ordinary responsibilities and concerns, such as work, relationships, or health. People who have developed an addiction may not be aware that their behavior is out of control and causing problems for themselves and others. So here's how these cycles work. Our hearts were designed to have everything they need: affirmation, purpose, discipline, worth, love, and attention. But sadly, we all grew up in a broken world where we don't receive all these things. And even worse, we experience pain and trauma as well. The broken world breaks our hearts and leaves us with real needs. So we go through life with unmet needs that we are only vaguely aware of. We just know something's not right. Then we are exposed to things people use to try to make themselves feel better. Things like drugs or alcohol, overeating, success, relationships, sex, or porn. These things never meet the real needs of our hearts. But one or more of these things can become obsessions because they temporarily give us the illusion of meeting our needs. When we use, our vague pain temporarily subsides, but shortly thereafter we have more pain than before, and we sense that what we are doing is wrong. For example, someone who is not given enough attention, they might find that when they are drunk, they become the life of the party, and then they get lots of attention, so they keep repeating the behavior and could eventually get hooked on alcohol. For someone who was not affirmed, they might find that they get congratulated when they do well at work. And you can see that if this cycle continues long enough, they risk becoming a workaholic. For me, my heart was broken by my parents' divorce and by bullying in junior high. I felt very emasculated and insecure and unwanted. So when I turned 13 and a buddy found his dad's Playboy stash, it just completely overwhelmed me. I was instantly obsessed. I realize now, in hindsight, that it briefly made me feel like a man, feel wanted, and oddly, it made me feel accepted. After only a short while, we end up in an addiction cycle. Something triggers us. It could be something that relates to the addiction. A porn addict could see a suggestive image, or an alcoholic might see people having drinks. But more often than not, the trigger is some kind of pain, guilt, or stress. If we haven't developed healthy ways to deal with our pain, guilt, or stress, we can become preoccupied with thoughts of using because we think it'll make us feel better. This obsession affects our concentration and takes us away from being present in the moment. Our body starts to produce adrenaline as we get excited about using and also have that internal conflict of wanting to do something we know is wrong or harmful. Adrenaline gives us energy and is associated with the fight or flight response. Then our faulty beliefs usually come out. Things like thinking that we are not lovable, or there is no point to life, or that the purpose of life is our own personal happiness, to look out for number one, which of course we assume that's us. Then these faulty beliefs lead us to rationalize our bad choices. We think to ourselves, I need this. This is my right. All men do it. My life's screwed up anyway, etc. Rationalizing is simply telling ourselves rational lies. At this point in the cycle, and in the next two stages, dopamine is released. Dopamine is basically the brain's reward system. It tends to get released when doing things that are pleasurable. Dopamine likes novelty, changes, the unexpected. And that is why addictions don't stay static but end up getting worse. We end up chasing the dragon. After we have rationalized our choice to use, we plan out our using. For the porn addict, it might be figuring out when the house will be empty. For the alcoholic, where to go drinking. For the codependent sex addict, getting dressed provocatively to go out for a rendezvous. After going around this cycle enough times, these behaviors become rituals to us and are actually part of the experience. At this stage, endorphins are released. Endorphins are the body's natural painkillers. So you can see why a person hurting can get so trapped. And then, of course, we go out and do the thing we know we shouldn't be doing. We still have endorphins running through our body, and we get another strong hit of dopamine. But what I find really fascinating is that for any type of sex addict, they also get a hit of oxytocin. Oxytocin is a powerful hormone. It gets released in small doses during hugging and kissing, but in large doses during childbirth, breastfeeding, and orgasm. It is designed to bond two people together. This is a major factor in why a person who has felt unloved can get trapped in a sexual addiction. Then there is this brief period of emotional numbness and then despair. All of those brain chemicals stop being produced. We regret what we've done. We feel the familiar ache of all our real needs come back. And guilt, shame, and fear set in. This is also the time we can start to believe things that just simply aren't true, like there's no hope to ever stop this addiction. We are terrible people, etc. And in many cases, the consequences of our actions set in as well. And like I said earlier, our most common triggers are pain, guilt, or stress, so the despair of acting out can trigger us to start the cycle all over again. But here's the really good news. This cycle can be broken, and a new healthy cycle of recovery can replace it. So let's play it out. We get triggered again. While we are able to do things to reduce how often we get triggered, we will never be able to remove the triggers entirely. And the moment of being triggered is the key moment. The battle is usually won or lost right there. Our first instinct is to go back to that familiar but destructive addiction cycle we know so well. But we have another choice. Maybe after going to a recovery group, we get somebody's phone number, we pick up that 500-pound phone and actually call for help, and maybe we've begun to experience real community and love, so we decide, maybe for the first time ever, to say no and not use. Hallelujah. When we realize that we are able to say no and do the right thing, we feel good about ourselves, and this fills us with confidence. This confidence begins to help us see that we have purpose in life. Our lives have meaning. Spending time away from the addiction begins to cleanse our heart and our minds. Then we begin to experience joy. Joy is much deeper than happiness. Joy is the ability to be content under any circumstance. As we spend more time away from the addiction, we can start to develop solid relationships with other people who are sober. We start coming out of our isolation, and that community really helps us. Continuing on this cycle leads us to a lasting recovery from our addictions and destructive habits. But we always need to be careful and stay humble, because the next trigger will come. When you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. So here are some insights that these cycles can provide. We need to figure out what triggers us and do anything we can do to reduce the number or frequency of these triggers. For example, porn addicts need to put porn blockers on all their devices, or maybe get rid of their devices altogether. Alcoholics need to stay away from bars. But more importantly, all addicts need to reduce their emotional triggers. And nothing will trigger us more than our areas of real need. So we need to figure out what broke our hearts and actively pursue our own healing. There are many ways to do this. The most important is to learn about and then develop an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. Addiction counseling can be a huge help. Recovery groups are very good. Inner healing classes can help. And there are many great books and videos as well. There is so much help freely available that there really is no excuse. We need to take the time to figure out the things that are messing with our lives and then deal with them. This is a big part of every 12-step group, and it includes things like forgiving people, including ourselves, making amends, and asking God to remove our character defects. Sometimes it includes making large, disruptive changes in our life. For example, if we have a really unhealthy relationship, especially with people who pull us back to our addiction, we might have to take a break from those people or even end those relationships, which for some people may mean having to find a new place to live. While these might be hard choices, they are good choices, And of course, we have to be very thoughtful that is the right choice and get other people's counsel as well. Which means we need to learn to live in community and get out of isolation. We need to find healthy people to support, encourage, correct, and love us. And we need to do the same for others. We need to die to self-sufficiency. Stop being lone wolves. When we get triggered, we need to call someone for help. You know, it's not only good to remove a bad habit, we also need to replace it with good things. With everything I've said, our focus should not be on just quitting the addiction, but on living in the life that we are created to have. So pursue things that are healthy and bring joy into your life. If you're not part of a good church, join one. If you have a hobby or sport that you've neglected, take it up again. The preoccupation part of the addiction cycle robs us of our creativity. So part of getting healthy again is to get that creativity back. All those brain chemicals I mentioned earlier were given to us as a gift from God. And these types of activities release these chemicals in healthy ways. We need to know our greater purpose. While there are people who get sober without having a sense of their life's greater purpose, we'll be more likely to actually get sober once we know our reason for living. This is where most recovery groups talk about a higher power. Sometimes they say that your higher power can be whatever you want it to be, but let's think this through. If you make up a higher power, how exactly is it higher than you? No, there is a higher power, and he has a name. His name is Jesus, and the greatest purpose of your life is to be in a relationship with him. He is the only person who can heal our hearts and completely satisfy all of our needs. He's a real person we can talk to, so he will give us guidance on how to get sober. There are even more things that can help us, and it's up to us to do the work. We cannot blame anyone else for our addictions, and no one else is responsible to do the work of recovering for us. So I hope this helped you understand yourself better and gave you insights on how to break the cycle of addiction and start the cycle of recovery. If you think this could help someone you know, you may want to share it with them. Or if you have some other insights on how to get free from addiction, please share it in the comments below. The addiction cycle is real, but it can be broken.